Luke Skywalker and Han Solo rescued the princess, destroyed the Death Star, but their story didn't end there.
Hi, my name is Ryan, and today I'm going to be talking about practical versus visual effects, and the advantages and disadvantages of both, while also diving into specific directors that utilize both and or one over the other. We will also look at the practicality along with the final result. Today is Now, there is a difference between the two. A practical effect is an effect produced physically without computer-generated imagery or the other post-production techniques, while a visual effect is a process by which imagery is created and or manipulated outside the context of a living action shot. Now, those are the textbook definitions to break it down. Practical effects are the stuff done in real life, such as makeup, props, and pyrotechnics, while visual effects are the stuff done in a computer, such as 3D models, matte paintings, and green screens. Now, it is important to utilize the two of them together and not treat them as separate entities. Peter Jackson, while making his Lord of the Rings movies, was a very smart decision to use both special and visual effects to achieve the final image. Both have their limitations, and you need to recognize those disadvantages so you know how to achieve the end goal. We'll talk about those limitations later, but for now, we'll talk about how they worked well together. Mistakes, say you have created a practical effect of a guy getting blown backwards, or a guy getting punched in the face. These are both practical effects, but they had problems. You see, for the punch, it looks off, and the guy getting shot back had wires in the shot. Here, you'll need VFX to help with your practical effects. They go side by side. A lot of the time, you'll need both to get a good effect. Say you did the blowback in CGI. It would look fake and cost a little bit more money and time. Or if you did it fully practical, you can see he was just pulled back by wires. This is why your shot can't really rely on one over the other, and most of the time, it should consist of both effects. Now, in comparing the two, there was one franchise that really comes to mind. Well, actually two. Lord of the Rings / The Hobbit series and Star Wars. But we will focus on Star Wars since it's the biggest one. Now, as most people know, Star Wars has 3 great films, with significant cultural impacts. Now, a lot of people blame it on the overwhelming amount of CGI they used, and how what he wanted to be done was not possible with computers at the time. Now, big battles today can be done pretty well with CGI without any practicality, but back then it looked pretty bad. Now, with the first movies, he used almost all practical effects, which at the time was necessary and worked well for a lot of the parts, but will never convince anyone it's real. There is definitely a lot of talent involved, and there's a great movie on it. I'll leave it in the description to anyone who's curious about how they made some mind-blowing shots. But the newest and latest film, Star Wars Force Awakens, J.J. Abrams understood that the two complemented each other and can both be utilized. He understood that he can do the real explosions and real puppets for aliens, but also have done VFX for a lot of the other stuff. Now, I do not know why they decided to make this weird-ass motherfucker all CGI. You can tell it's fake, and it's a problem, but it doesn't change the fact he was smart about it. Now, to be smart about it, you need to know the positives and negatives of practicality in film. To start off, there are a lot of positives when it comes to use more practical reasons to get your stuff. Realism. When you see something that is actually happening, it feels like it's happening. In 2001, when the spaceship is spinning, you feel as it is spinning. When the hallway is turning in Inception, it feels like it's turning. You can tell, and it is really interesting and impressive to do. Not to mention, it is a lot of fun to be on the sets. Now, in the past, it was much more common to see insanities of the special effects being used because the means of visual effects were just not there. Things in the past like The Thing needed to be done with practical effects because it was not possible to make horrible VFX sequences. Talking about the remake. Now, it is so nice to see directors such as Christopher Nolan and George Miller using more practical effects to create their product. I'm not saying they don't use VFX, because they do, but they understand the practical effects are dying and should have more light shined upon them. Now, Nolan in all of his movies rely on great practical effects when it comes to building huge sets, or just crash in a car. He knows that making it real will almost always look better. Because it is actually happening. Not saying visual effects create a close replica, because they do, but movies such as Interstellar, The Dark Knight, and Inception use great practical effects. Now, all this sucking off practical effects has not truly led us into negatives that come with really doing the thing. The one I want to emphasize the most is time. Time is very important, as anyone who has made a film will tell you. Movies take time, and you have all the time after you're done filming to edit and add composite imagery, but you only have so much time with the actors on set. So it takes a lot more time to get everything set up to get that shot. Now, the problem is people will say, "Oh fuck it, we'll do it in post." It's a very common phrase you'll hear. Now, when Peter Jackson decides to take the VFX supervisors of his movies on set so they can tell him if there was anything they needed to change, it would make a lot easier for them. And they start getting impatient and telling them, "Oh, just do it without the green screen, we'll rotoscope it." So the problem with time is that it's an entity and it's not something you can get back. And having the need for everyone to be on time is a hard task to accomplish. Instead of having people all over the world working on different computers, AI not in the same spot. Now besides, time is money and ironically, practicality. In real terms, it is unrealistic to spend so much time on a rotating set that it will only be in the movie for about 5 minutes. We spent this much money and we spent this much time on it when we could have done it in post. Most companies will not let you get away with this simply because it's not practical for them. While maybe it did give them a better end result, most people will not have the budget to do that. Now, to fully understand that it is not practical to film things practically, it is important to know that CGI is not always the better route for a good end result. Now, I'll start off by talking about the negatives of visual effects, and that it is the demand. It is a very, very competitive market, with everyone asking for fast and better looking effects, and that's the main problem. Artists that are not given enough time to complete their shot. The creators of these movies are not patient, very much like the supervisors on Lord of the Rings, so they just ask for more and more and more, without it being possible. So that is really what it comes to when talking about bad visual effects, is time. That is why you probably see more and more films with just awful CGI. It's not that they hire bad artists, it's that they just don't give them enough time to work on it. Now, to really talk about visual effects correctly, we need to talk about David Fincher. Fincher has an advantage since he started doing VFX before becoming a director. Now, this director is known for having no shame in letting visual effects enhance his imagery. He even makes his dialogue scenes flow better. And if you want to know what I mean by this, Ben Gill has a great video on it. Check him out. Anyhow, Fincher understands that visual effects are not bad and just need to be done correctly. Some shots he might have thought they actually filmed, but later found out it was fully fake. Fincher also understands that compositing an image to look real can be really hard. Knowing what it would actually look like through a lens of a camera can be difficult. It's hard to match the look of exposure and focus of the shot without a real guideline. So Fincher will, for example, add some small fire to the scene so people doing the work in post will have a reference to build their effect off of. Something that any artist in the field would appreciate, which also brings us back to director's acclaim for practicality, George Miller. He's known for using cars and explosions when a lot of the time he would enhance the image with visual effects. Now, back to the negatives. It's really hard to CGI people. Doing computer-generated imagery with people is a huge challenge. You see it done in the Curious Case of Benjamin Buttons, but even for that they needed real facial motion capture to get a good animation. This is like subsurface scattering, and many other facial details are so hard to recreate. But creating the image is not the hardest part about that. It's the animation that goes along with it. Bringing back the motion capture, it is so hard to animate real human movements without it. From a very young age, we recognize that the most subtle changes done with people's faces and posture that it is hard to recreate in CGI. With CGI animated films, it works because they can over-exaggerate since they are not trying to convince you that these are real actors. Which of course brings us back to the little alien things in Star Wars. The reason it looks so weird is because it is alive, like any other animal or human-looking thing, it is hard to get the movement on par with the real thing. That's what I believe to be the real challenge of VFX, not matching lights or modeling the objects, but animating it. Now, what computers are great at is objects. They are very good at rendering high-quality images of solid objects such as cars or buildings. So it is important that you don't have the time or budget for the grand spectacular shot. Consider filming it in a way that implies the idea rather than showing it to us. Because, you never know, it might be more effective. Now, it's super important to understand that visual effects and special effects should be looked at thoughtfully as different specialties with their own purposes, but merged to make the best result. And you should not let the idea of easy way out fool you from creating your art.